From the nation's capital, this is the Fly Fishing Consultant Podcast with your host, Rob Snowhite.
It's October 1st, 2019. This is episode 244 of the Fly Fishing Consultant Podcast featuring Kayla Royce of Trout Unlimited, Alaska. This episode is brought to you by Sweetwater Brewing Company. Kayla lives in Alaska and works for Trout Unlimited. She hunts and fishes its waters that depend on a healthy, unclear-cut, unmined, and undrilled wilderness. In this episode, we're going to hear all about her life as an Alaskan. Here's a brief quote from the Washington Post, because this is a very timely podcast, which is why I mentioned today's date. President Trump has instructed Agricultural Secretary Sonny Perdue to exempt Alaska's 16.7 million acres Tongass National Forest from logging restrictions imposed nearly 20 years ago. The move would affect more than half of the world's largest intact temperate rainforest, opening it to a potential logging, energy, and mining projects. Timber provides a small fraction of southeastern Alaskan jobs, just under 1%. According to the Regional Development Organization's Southeast Conference, compared with seafood processing's 8% and tourism's 17%. You only have a few days to act once this episode goes live. Quickly share this podcast link with others on social media and please encourage them to contact the representatives and to click on the links and sign some documents. We're going to try and all help protect this globally unique ecosystem. Sweetwater beer, it just tastes good. But there's more you should know. Sweetwater Brewing has been making tasty brews in the heart of the South since 1997. You may have seen their beers featured on an early episode of The Walking Dead. Throughout the year, Sweetwater partners with several like-minded organizations to promote water and land conservation, allowing them to give back locally, nationally, and globally. This October, Sweetwater is partnering with Casting for Recovery, a program that helps women battling breast cancer through fly fishing. Please visit sweetwaterbrew.com and pick up a sixer to bring to your next event. Hopefully, where you live, Sweetwater is available. If not, contact your local distributor. Let's talk to Kayla now. All right, we have Kayla with us today. You want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hey guys. My name is Kayla Royce. I work for Trout Unlimited Alaska, and I am based in Juneau, Alaska. And so Trout Unlimited is actually a national-based organization which protects and conserves freshwater spawning habitat for salmon, trout, and steelhead. And so here in Southeast Alaska, my focus and outreach is sort of with all of our local streams, all of our local waters around Southeast Alaska.
And you are a native Alaskan?
Yes, I was born and raised here in Juneau.
Do they have native stickers up there?
No. Well, so technically I'm not native Alaskan, but I'm native to the land. So I'm third generation Alaskan.
Wow.
So yeah. My grandfather moved here in the 50s, 60s or so. So yeah.
Fantastic. And who is your fur baby?
My fur baby, his name is Lego. And he's a tank. He's my favorite.
Dude's got a big head on him.
Yes, he does. Yeah, he's an English lab. So that's like I walk him through the woods and tourist season comes around and he's like scaring tourists in the trees because he romps around and they think he's a bear.
And you're the first person who I've ever emailed that wasn't in town because they were moose hunting. So I got an office reply out of town. You were out shooting a moose, huh?
Yes, yeah. So it's kind of the Alaskan way of life, right? Is to hunt and fish for our food for the winter. And I've tried so hard in years past to deer hunt and whatnot. And this year I got super lucky and I got drawn for an any bull moose permit. And so it is sort of just a way for Alaskans to, get meat for their families. And so that's exactly what I did. It was amazing. I've never seen an animal so big, let alone, killed and harvested an animal so big. So it was really amazing.
What does that look like up close? How big was that moose?
Oh my gosh, it was huge. It was bigger than a horse. I can tell you the gut pile was massive. I was kind of set back by it.
Yeah, I couldn't get that far. Shooting it would be difficult for me, but having to open it up, I would probably lose my breakfast.
Yeah, well, luckily I had a group of dudes that have all done it before, and so they were all super helpful. Like, I didn't necessarily have to get in there and figure it all out. I mean, this animal, I think I brought home almost 800 pounds of meat. So,
wow.
Yeah, so I mean, it was incredible.
What is going to be your favorite meal out of that moose?
I just love a simple moose steak, actually. The moose burgers are super great too, though. The burger meat is great and is super lean, so you don't feel, it's not like a greasy spoon diner that you go to.
And have you ever grown the giant heads of cabbage up there, or the giant pumpkins?
I have not. Southeast, we typically don't get enough sunlight for that in the summer. We get too much rain. If I had a greenhouse, I think I could totally do it, but the rain and sun ratio is a little bit skewed here in Southeast. So a lot of those cabbages and whatnot are more like South Central, up in the valleys, and they get some awesome sun throughout the summer.
All right.
Definitely. Yeah.
So was your childhood pretty much outside, hunting, shooting, fishing?
Yeah, not as much hunting as it was fishing. I grew up in a super fishy family. My grandfather worked for Fish and Game here in Juneau. My dad he worked for a float plane company while I was growing up. And so our summers were spent out on remote lakes camping and fishing and just sort of berry picking and scavenging. And, where I grew up in Juneau is actually right below Mount Juneau and Mount Roberts. And so my parents were all right, go outside, go play. And there were a few kids in the neighborhood, and we'd knock on each other's doors and we'd just go run around the woods. And yeah, it was a super great childhood. It was a great way to grow up.
When you come out to DC, are you in complete culture shock?
It's kind of crazy. Yeah. The last time I was in DC, I always enjoy it because especially, walking around the mall area and whatnot, it's great. There's so much culture there, but there's just so many people. Yeah. I don't necessarily enjoy it. I prefer to go on vacations where I'm left alone, and I like the thought that walking around in the woods here that you could be standing somewhere that it's possible no one else has ever stood in that exact place. And that's not something you typically find in the East Coast.
Yeah. And when you were growing up, did you plan on being one of the voices and protectors of your environment and your surroundings?
I really didn't. No, I sort of grew up and I went through a phase where I was super into fishing, or I wanted to get super into fishing, I should say. And I've always respected the outdoors, but I never really saw myself as that voice. And then I started working for the local fly fishing shop here in Juneau about 5.5 years ago or so. And just working there, I realized that there was such a gap in, both there's no young voices out there to speak up for what we care about and or what we should care about. And so I just felt like it was really important that, I need to get involved and I need to start understanding and learning and educating myself and educating others. And so it just sort of, tumbled from there and here I am.
And this would be an awesome podcast if it was just about you and all your fishing and life up there. But again, we've got to deal with some political issues that we thought we were done with. And this is one of the things I worked on in college was trying to get the wilderness passed by Clinton.
Yes.
And now we find ourselves in a muck again. It's been in the New York Times, the Washington Post, TU's website, TU Alaska. So let's talk about the Tongass right now and how listeners can voice their support and do some protecting that should already be done, and we shouldn't be having to do this.
I know, it's kind of a heartbreak. Yeah, so, for the listeners, if you've never been to Southeast Alaska, the Tongass National Forest is the largest national forest in the U.S., and it actually covers just about all of Southeast. And yeah, it's about 17 million acres. And under that, about 9.4 million acres are protected under the current Roadless Rule.
Do you want to explain the Roadless Rule for those that don't know?
Yeah, there's a lot of the Roadless Rule is such for a lot of people it's confusing, but cut and dry, the Roadless Rule prohibits new road construction and commercial logging on this 9.4 million of forested acres. And so right now, under the current congressionally designated lands, it only protects like 1/3 of the documented fish habitat. And so that's why the Roadless Rule protections are so critical for these backcountry fish and wildlife habitat areas. And so the Roadless Rule it's intended to keep public lands public, salmon and trout habitat, wildlife habitat, deer, bear, eagle habitat, and strong economies all in place and protected for future generations.
Economies being fishing commercially, tourism, ecotourism.
Yep.
What else goes on up there?
Yeah. So, around here, the fishing and tourism industry is huge. And so I think now I want to say about 1 million visitors visit Southeast Alaska annually. And that's just, through a 5-year period, 5-month period of time, mostly on cruise ships. But a lot of those people, we also get a lot of people coming to places like the Seatuck River in Yakutat, a lot of people going to Cordova, the Sayu River, Juneau. It's a lot of ocean fishing around here for salmon and halibut and whatnot. And all of that, the commercial, the sport, and subsistence fisheries, as well as tourism, really drive Southeast Alaska.
Are those people going to show up on tour boats if the Trump administration allows mining and logging and oil drilling up there?
That one's a hard one. Yeah. Do you really want to come into a city that's been, has blatant clear-cut swaths through the middle of it?
Yeah.
That is the question. Yeah. Yeah. And, the Roadless Rule, it really is here to protect us. And so there's a lot of things that we can do in roadless areas, right? It's public land. So that means we can hunt, we can fish, camp, hike, bike. We can cut our own firewood for our cabins. You can pick berries. The list goes on, right? It's a public land. You can use it for what you will. It's also there for forest restoration projects. So anything to improve like species habitats, restore ecosystems, any work to prevent wildfires, that's all allowed. The oil, gas, and mineral exploration is actually allowed under the current Roadless Rule. So future oil, gas, and mineral development is allowed. And all existing rights are unaffected by the Roadless Rule.
And the governor and I believe your senator are not on board with what the Trump administration wants to do by re-allowing people to go in there. And is he just trying to go over their heads just to make his buddies more rich?
Yeah. So our current governor and President Trump they seem to have a friendship, that they both are seeing eye to eye when it comes to opening the Tongass and a full exemption from the Roadless Rule. Yeah. And so, my whole thing is that there's a sustainable way to do things, and clear-cut old growth logging is not that in the Tongass. Yeah. And so, what the Roadless Rule really is stopping. So clear-cut logging of old growth forests, realistically, that's some of the most damaging type of logging in these prohibited roadless areas. And then logging roads with the intent to commercial log off of them. You can't build a new logging road. And that also, that it increases sediment into all the streams. It blocks salmon migration. It can really ruin a great spawning habitat for salmon, trout, and steelhead. And
now,
so
would people be taking ATVs and other things through the streams where these fish would be spawning and disturbing their nesting habitats?
One can assume, yes. I don't know that for a fact, but the easiest way up a hillside or down a hillside is through the river.
Do you call them ATVs up there?
I would call them four-wheelers, but
four-wheelers.
Yeah, same thing.
Okay, I've got the old terminology. I still call it a sea-doo, a jet ski, the one they used to stand up on. Yeah. I'll have young clients. I'm like, it's a jet ski, and they'll look at me like, "What are you talking about?" I'm like, "Come on, I'm not that old."
What do people call them now? I would call them a jet ski as well.
Oh, because the jet ski was the one you used to stand up on. You may remember the MacGyver episode when he was in Europe and he was in a coffin and he had to escape the country, so they threw the coffin overboard and he broke out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. There's some other things. I had a 5th grade client the other day and his 2nd grade brother. I said, I'm going somewhere. No, I went fishing for 7 days. And he said, why don't you just call it going for a week? It's easier. And I looked at this kid and I'm like, all right, you got a point. So, yeah, the kids will correct me these days. Yeah.
You're not wrong.
Now, what about the massive influx of reality shows filmed in Alaska. Are there any that focus in and around the Tongass?
Gosh, I think that the one that's closest to Juneau is probably Gold Rush Days, which takes place in Haines, which is like a 4-hour ferry ride away from here.
I don't like watching shows like that
where
where they're
about
just
60 miles, but
where they're just slurping up the bottom and dredging and all that.
Yeah.
I don't know how that makes it on TV.
People are interested about Alaska. I think that that's really it, right? Is that Alaska sort of has this like air of mystery for most people, and it seems like it's so far away and it's such an exotic place, when in reality we're not that far away. It's about a 2.5-hour flight from Juneau to Seattle. Alaska's a massive state, so it is hard to get everywhere, but it's not so disconnected.
Right. I plan on making a reality show about making Alaskan reality shows.
Just travel to all of the spots.
Yeah.
That would be a great show. That actually might be worth watching.
So other than people like me who live on the East Coast who've never been to Alaska, I know there's bears, eagles, and salmon. I've seen some of these shows where people live in the woods, hunt and fish and survive. What other organisms live there that are going to be protected if we can't mine and log and drill up there? What are the Tongass known for that somebody out of state that doesn't have a reality TV cable channel, what would they be wanting to protect?
So here in Southeast, there's all 5 species of Pacific salmon. And so that's the king salmon, the sockeye salmon, the silver salmon, chum salmon, and pink salmon. And so there's wild runs of all 5 species of these fish. We also have the steelhead, which is, most people know about steelhead, I would presume.
Oh, yes.
In Southeast, predominantly we have our trout are the sea run cutthroat trout, and then the Dolly Varden, which is sort of like the cousin to the Arctic char. And then we have some rainbow trout in places. And then in a few places, there's also some grayling. But most predominantly, it's cutthroat and Dolly Varden.
Are there non-sport fish species that also live there?
The non-sport fish would be the trout and the steelhead. Yep.
Really? You don't have, we've got bluegills
I guess
and
they're
stuff
sport
here.
fish. No, I guess those are sport fishing. I go out and catch them. We really don't. There are, there's rockfish and halibut. I don't know. We don't have any bluegills. We don't have any.
What's a bycatch when you're up there? I hear Dolly Varden is a bycatch.
Yeah, that's kind of the bycatch, is that you'll be fishing for salmon and you'll catch dollies. Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
There's
a lot of those. Yeah, there's a lot of those. And, and they range in size so much. And, in the springtime, it's super fun. They're just they're cruising the beaches and they feed on salmon fry in the spring. With all the out-migrating salmon smolt, they just cruise the beach lines. And so you're fishing actually in the estuary, so where the saltwater and freshwater mix. And you can use small, spinners, or for me, I use little bait fish patterns and just mimic the salmon fry. And they're just they're little animals. They love eating. Yeah, and they're super fun to catch around,
What about the beads? Are you down with the beads? Is that a necessity?
A lot of people fish beads, yeah. So, especially when the salmon are in full spawn, it's hard to beat bead fishing. I don't bead fish as often as I used to anymore, just because I like to try to trick fish in other ways. Because that's, I think essentially part of fly fishing is that you're just tricking the fish to eat your lure or your fly. And yeah, so, I'll go out with a friend and they'll bead fish, and I will have a little attractor pattern on, and they will 100% outfish me, but I still scratch up a few, so it's still good fishing.
I'd rather scratch up a few than again, yeah. I haven't done it before. My buddy Mac last week said he did some pegging of beads, and it was quite successful.
Yeah.
So I can't knock it till I'm there.
Sometimes it's so insane. And if you just want, last summer, I think I had 2 friends visiting. The 3 of us were fishing, and I think between the 3 of us on one watershed in one day, I think there were probably $150 landed. It was insane. Every cast, you're just sitting there with your with your fly dangling, and you catch a fish. It was yeah. So if you really just want to rack up some numbers and have a lot of fun that way, then it was really fun.
Do people eat Dolly Varden?
They can, yeah, definitely. It's it's any other trout. And so they're smaller. They range anywhere from like, I would say 8 to 20 inches usually in Southeast. And I will say, I mean, I grew up in Southeast Alaska, and I will be the first to admit that I am a fish snob through and through. And I would prefer to eat a salmon over a trout any day.
And what's your favorite salmon to eat?
My favorite salmon, I think, is the king salmon, for sure. I think the oil content, the flavor is really the best. Technically, the sockeye has more oils in their meat, and so they're the oiliest, but I really like the king salmon.
Are you going for the spring Chinooks? For the more fat content?
You could go all over, but, you know, typically the sport fishing season for kings is sort of May through June. May through late May, early July. Yeah, and so this was the first year I caught like the biggest king salmon I've ever caught on the fly this year. And the fight was way longer than I, had hoped. But it was, and I harvested it. I took it home for dinner, and it was 30 pounds gutted and gilled. And so it was crazy. I like shed a little tear when I landed it.
What's your setup and rigging and whole outfit for salmon fishing?
For salmon fishing, like generally an 8-weight fly rod is the go-to. Silvers range anywhere. They're probably average like 12 pounds around these areas. They can get as big as 17 on average. And then, so they're really like kind of the powerhouses, aside from kings. And then, for pink salmon, they're usually, 5-pound fish or so. But oftentimes when you're casting to them, it's like windy, so an 8-weight is still necessary. Chum, same thing, 8-weight across the board. For kings, I typically use a 10-weight, just because it's sort of that question of like, you probably could land a big king on an 8-weight if you tired it out enough, but are you going to tire out before the fish, or is the fish going to tire out before you? I think I would probably tire out before the king, so I definitely upped my game with the 10-weight and use that. And then, for just about every other salmon species, though, I use an 8-weight. And typically a lot of our fishing is sort of like estuary based, as well as freshwater based. And so I like to have a solid aluminum reel.
Do your flies change when you're targeting different species?
Yeah, typically. It's a funny one. Like with pink salmon, typically they eat anything pink. With silvers, they kind of vary. They could be eating any color fly, but typically you're trying to like use a color that's contrasting to what's going on outside. And then a fly that sort of, it flashes and it displaces a little bit of water. So there's a lot of streamer fishing around here, just sort of rabbit string leeches. The Dalai Lama is like the fly of Alaska right now. And although it's a really difficult one to cast because it's so heavy, I think that's why it's so productive, is because it really dips and dives in the water. Yeah. So, color changes, the size of the fly changes. Obviously, you can't really fish a 5, your fly that you're using for a pink salmon, which is, made for a 5-pound fish, versus a fly that's made for a king salmon, which is a, 30-pound fish. A little different. You got to have a bigger hook and a bigger sort of body to the fly.
Will they bend the hooks out for the bigger kings?
Yeah, they will. Yeah. I bent a hook out last year, so I used some more expensive hooks this year. Yeah.
And what is winter like for you?
So winter in Southeast is sort of, it's not like I think people would imagine that like winter in Alaska is like, because we're on saltwater. Like I'm looking out my living room window right now, and I can see the, a local harbor and the saltwater right in front.
What? I see Jim and Bonnie's house, and I see Olga's house and a dead maple tree.
Yeah. So
Power lines.
In Juneau, I live on Douglas Island, and so it's an island surrounded by saltwater. There's one bridge to Juneau from, and it's saltwater everywhere. And so because of that, our winters are pretty moderate, right? We get snow in the mountains, but a lot of like on the ground here too, but it's a lot of rain. We get a lot of rain. So the Tongass National Forest is actually the largest temperate rainforest, or the largest intact temperate rainforest in the U.S. Actually, I think that's globally, but so it really is that it's saltwater sort of enhanced, and so we get a lot more rain than snow in Juneau.
And being that it's the largest, it's not just America's to protect. It's kind of everybody's. I mean, because the salmon aren't just going to eat, they're going to feed everyone across the Pacific Ocean.
Yeah. China
can't grow their own food, so they got to take our pigs and our salmon.
Yep. I mean, I think that, like the commercial caught salmon definitely help feed, the world. I wish that I had statistics on how far the fish go, but I unfortunately don't. But yeah, I mean, I think that the rivers, lakes, and streams in the Tongass produce about 80% of the commercial salmon annually harvested from Southeast.
Wow. So if they do come in and start tearing it up, how long do you think it would take, or has it been predicted, how long that would basically take to destroy the environment? Bring all of that economy to a halt?
I don't know. I mean, it's a great question. I don't know the answer to, so I can't really speak to it. All I know is that, the memories that I had from my childhood would drastically change from those of like children growing up now if it did happen.
Has it changed at all? Is it getting better? Or have you seen a decline since the Bush administration tried to reverse some of the rules in the early 2000s?
I haven't seen a ton. I guess one of the other issues with logging, right, is that there's not a ton of money in it anymore. There used to be, but a lot of it was sort of supported by, federal subsidies and whatnot. And so nowadays there's not much money in it. So there's been a few timber sales that the Forest Service has tried to make, and, nobody will bid on them. QU Island, there's been a few, open timber sales, and nobody wants to buy it.
So why would they want to reopen it up to allow logging if no one's buying it?
It's a great question.
Yeah.
That I don't know the answer to.
My goodness. What other are the natural resources there besides the fish, the minerals, the trees? Is it just priceless that it's there? And it's worth more being intact than it is if they destroy it?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think that there's a statistic. I think that the Tongass holds 6% of carbon emitted in, the U.S. or the world. And that's a lot.
How big are those trees? If they're Pacific Northwest rainforest trees, those things have got to be pretty darn big.
A lot of them are, yeah. They're not as big as like the redwoods by any means, but I have gone to a few areas where you look at the trees and it's insane. Our trees sort of grow in a canopy format more so, and so they grow taller than they do wide. And so it's sort of an interesting, I've always heard it, and I don't know if it's a true fact, but I've always heard it that they're all fighting for the sunlight.
Yeah, it's right, same in the rainforest.
Yeah, exactly. And so they grow super tall. And, a big issue with our trees here too is that when we get a huge windstorm, oftentimes those roots are they're all bedded together, and they're not tap roots. And so they're very low soil roots. If one falls over, a lot of them fall over, right? Because of the sort of just the way that they're growing, super tall and not super wide. But yeah, the forest around here is wild. We have the large canopy of trees. It's mostly made up of spruce, hemlock, and then some yellow cedar. And then underneath that, I think there's hundreds of different types of ferns, berries, plants. One of our main plants that nobody seems to like a ton is the Devil's Club plant, which
I've heard about that.
Yeah, it's super piney. You get those needles in you and they just don't come out for a long time. But they also refer to it as almost like the ginseng of Alaska. It has major medicinal, properties, and it's it's a really cool plant, but it's a hard one to harvest and deal with.
What would it have thorns to protect itself from?
Probably from us, right?
Yeah. Does it make fruit, berries, flowers? Is something trying to eat it?
No, just humans. You can harvest the buds in the springtime when they're blooming, and you can make a ton of food out of that. You also the stalk and the root all have medicinal properties as well. So you can make teas, you can make salves. It's supposed to be really great for arthritis and for skin problems.
Skin problems you get when you get punctured by its thorns?
Yeah, probably, yes. Yes, exactly.
What else up there is dangerous besides the bears? But apparently every time I see the bears, they're too preoccupied with the fish.
Yeah.
Unless you're out on Kodiak.
The bear population is pretty massive here. I'm kind of thankful because here in Juneau itself, the major bear population are black bears. And so our black bears are fairly small and, typical sort of urbanized bears. A lot of them I sort of, like in my parents' neighborhood below the hills, or below the mountains, they're generally, we see a couple in the yard every year, and they're generally after your trash. You shoo them away and they don't come back. There are some like brown bears that are moving into the area. And so that's always a little freaky. Yeah, a lot of the areas, I guess, do have brown bear populations. And so they're our biggest sort of predator in the area. There's also wolves in the Juneau area and just the Southeast Alaska area. Lots of deer. We have the Sitka blacktail deer. Not that that's a predator of ours, but it's an animal in the area. Lots of like grouse and ptarmigan.
What about non-native species? If somebody were to come from 400 years ago, would they still recognize that area as what it was back in the day? Like you look around here, and there's not a whole lot of native stuff left. Mm-hmm. We got just birds and bugs and plants galore that do not belong in Virginia.
Yeah.
Do you have starlings out there?
I don't even know what a starling is.
That's a good answer. I think you're good. It was the bird from England, and then the guy wanted all the Shakespearean mentioned birds in Central Park, so he released a couple dozen in the 1800s, and now there's 2.5 billion of them in North America.
Gosh. No, I don't think we have starlings. We do, we have pigeons, but I don't think that those were introduced here. I wouldn't imagine that they were. I think they are probably just here, but I don't know the answer to that one.
Yeah, I guess back in the day, those were called rock doves. They were native.
Yeah. Yeah, I would assume that they're native, but I don't, to my knowledge, there hasn't been much introduced in the area that has sort of stuck.
Would it just not live because it's a harsh environment?
Maybe, yeah. It's also just, it's kind of a wild environment, so I don't know why we would need more non-native species.
Right. Now, Alaska State Troopers, is that a real show?
I've never watched it, so I don't know. I think so. I think a lot of it is based in South Central, maybe? I've never known it to be a Southeast Alaska based.
Did you ever watch Slednecks?
I did not watch Slednecks, no.
That was one of my other Alaskan educational shows.
Your guilty indulgence.
Yeah, we don't have much stations anymore. I think that was a one season only thing. But everyone wore the brown boots with the little, like, light-colored rim around them.
The extra toughs.
Yeah, that's what my neighbor wears. She used to be in Alaska for the Coast Guard.
Yeah. They're awesome boots. They, it's sort of a funny, it starts raining in the fall, and that's like the Alaskan sneaker.
Does that bring a lot of mosquitoes?
The summers?
Yeah, the rains.
The summertime it does get pretty, we do get some mosquitoes in the area. We also get the little black gnats, which are like the no-see-ums, which are a real pain in the neck. Those ones are almost worse than mosquitoes, I think. Mosquitoes, you can see them. You have a chance of slapping them before they bite you. But
yeah, you can hear them coming.
Yeah, exactly.
We have the large Asian tiger mosquitoes here, and you can definitely hear those things coming.
Yeah. You can typically hear ours, but
do you ever have to worry about stepping on snakes?
No, there's no snakes, and there's really, I think, there's one poisonous spider, like the black recluse or the brown recluse, maybe, and I've never seen one.
So you're like the opposite of Australia.
Yeah, no, we, aside from bears, and wolves, I guess, humans are pretty much the top of the food chain here, so there's not. I love it. I can leave my house and within, 15 minutes I can be on my favorite river and I can go alone and I don't have to be worried about my safety. And that's really, it's great. It's reassuring.
It's quite unique.
Yeah.
If my kid's climbing the front yard tree, I'm out there watching just because you never know who's around here.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess that, generally I'll eventually have to worry about things like that. But, I don't necessarily worry about myself. And, I think that I'm lucky too. I grew up in an area where my parents, taught me basic skills and, what we say in Juneau is that cotton kills. And so you never really wear cotton when you're out fishing or hunting or whatever, because if it starts raining and whatnot, you'll never dry. And so I think that that's probably one of our biggest threats in Southeast Alaska is like hypothermia. You get wet and you can't dry. And that's
what are you going to gear up with? Just all polypropylene, synthetic down?
Yep.
A lot of Gore-Tex?
Yep. A lot of Gore-Tex, a lot of synthetics, a lot of wools. Yeah, I don't own much cotton. And I've had friends that have moved to Juneau and, I say like, oh, cotton kills. And they're like, what does that even mean? You sound like an old man. This is like a weird anecdote you're saying. What does it mean? And I'm like, well, you think about it, you get wet, or even hiking up a mountain, you get sweaty, and then you sit down and you get cold and you can't get warm again. And so you need things that will like wick your sweat, wick the water away, and they'll still keep you warm.
Do most of the people that are outdoorsy, do they respect the environment there, knowing that it's such a large part of the lifestyle and income?
Yeah. I mean, the people that I know that sort of use the areas for public recreation definitely respect it. And yeah, it provides us with something, and we don't want to lose that.
And I imagine with a small population, if someone does go out and do something, everyone's going to know about it.
Yeah, I mean, we all read the public, what is it, the reports that the troopers and stuff put out. And so, yeah, if you get caught illegally harvesting the wrong size Dungeness crab, your name's in the paper, and people are going to know about it. So,
is there a Alaskan equivalent of Florida Man?
I don't know what Florida Man is.
Oh, okay. Do you have your phone?
Yeah.
Google your birth date and the word Florida Man. See what comes up. This was apparently a drinking game at the parents during our spring break trip this year.
Florida Man.
As Debbie Hansen said, all nuts roll downhill. And that's why all these people end up in Florida.
Oh, man. Florida Man damages parked cars because he could not find his car.
Yep, that's a Florida Man for you.
Oh. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think we have an equivalent to that.
So when you're working with TU, do you go up into the Tongass and work, or is it mostly like office job? Like field work versus desk?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of both. So my position is outreach coordinator. And so that could be, sending an email. That could be, taking a group out and showing them the Tongass. And so it definitely varies, which is fun for me. One of my coworkers from South Central came down, and her and I got to go out fishing for the day, and I got to show her some of my local, my favorite creeks. We went out in the boat one day and went out to Admiralty Island and went fishing over there, and it was just, it was great. And so for that, a lot of it, I think I like to think of my job as sort of an educational based job where I'm helping other people understand what's going on in the Tongass and why we should care. And so it definitely, I think every day changes. Yeah.
That's a pretty sweet job that you get to go out and take people fishing. I once worked at a job where they would take everyone golfing.
Oh.
And I just was with the other people that stayed behind. And everyone would come back drunk and sunburnt. I'm like, great.
And you didn't want to partake in that? I
was never invited. Quality assurance managers don't get to have fun.
No, I guess that's true.
That was
You're there to make sure that everyone else keeps their stuff together.
One time everyone was out and we were having a rubber band fight across the cubicles, and one of our coworkers told on us.
What?
And we got reprimanded.
Yeah, no, that's not fun.
I could do an hour podcast just about that dude. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I've had some interesting coworkers, but Robert was one of them. He was a strange bird.
I mean, we all have interesting coworkers. I only actually, so with this, Trout Unlimited has sort of branches all over the U.S. And in Alaska, I think there's 6 of us, but only 3 of us, or I guess there's maybe 7 or 8 of us, but only 3 of us are in Southeast. So we all work remotely from our houses, and we, meet once a week, and we have meetings all week, throughout the week. But it's sort of an interesting dynamic. I mean, we're definitely sort of, I don't think of Juneau as a remote community because we have, everything that I think you would need. We have a Costco, we have a Fred Meyer, we have, a McDonald's, but, working remotely is, it's sort of an interesting, intriguing thing. So, yeah.
What are some of the other projects the other coworkers are working on? Or is Tongass going to be like the big one that everyone's going to have to be fighting against now?
Yeah, so the Tongass, the Roadless Rule appeal right now is sort of the biggest one on everyone's radar. Another sort of, underlying issue that eventually will pop up again is that there's a lot of transboundary mines popping up in BC right now. And they're right at the headwaters of a lot of our sort of powerhouse rivers and streams. And so that's not my main focus today necessarily, but it will be, come future.
Are you just worried about mine tailings coming downstream, downhill?
Yep, exactly. Yeah, and it's sort of been an ongoing issue, both in Washington State, Idaho, Montana as well, and now it's also starting to pop up more in Alaska too. So
Umpqua they got a whole line of Tongass bags.
Yep.
And that is the proceeds going to you guys?
Yep, the proceeds were going to, a portion of the proceeds were going to the Tongass initiative, and so that was going to, stream restoration project in the Tongass.
So one way people can get involved is go out and buy
one way
Umpqua
they can
gear.
go. Yep, exactly. Another way is, realistically with the roadless repeal comments, we really could use all of the public's input and comment and tell the U.S. Forest Service that you want the roadless rule to stay intact. Yeah.
Is there
that's the big
form
one
on the TU website listeners can go to and click and send a letter to representatives?
There is, yeah. So there's a form letter on the TU webpage. There's also a form letter on the American Salmon Forest webpage. And so that's sort of the branch of TU that I'm working with at the moment. And so the American Salmon Forest was made, it's a coalition of sport anglers, commercial anglers, and it's just a coalition of people to come together to support wild salmon and wildlife habitats. And so on that webpage, that has the mecca of information about what's going on in the Tongass and then how you can get involved, how you can take action, all through that.
What about our listeners that could be in Japan, Australia, Finland? Can they get involved as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's so many people that come and visit the Tongass and fish these waters and hunt these places that, that's the one thing that I know. I'm very salmon and trout oriented, but there are a huge, number of people that come and they bear hunt and they deer hunt. And that could also greatly be affected if, these areas are clear-cut logged. So there's definitely, if you can jump onto the webpage, americansalmonforest.org, you can take action through that. And yeah, I don't see why not.
Are there other organizations in and around where you live that are non-fish related that are trying to get this law to stay put? Are there birding groups or whale watchers?
Yep. Maybe not as many whale watchers, but a lot of, hunting, fishing, guiding, and a lot of tourism industries. And
all the people that make a living off of it are the ones that are mostly voicing.
Yep,
their
exactly.
concern.
Yeah. Yeah, for anyone that it could harm the people and the economy of Southeast, all those people are getting involved.
And does the word Tongass translate to something?
I think that it was a Tlingit word. So I think the Tongass National Forest, it was named for the Tongass clan of Tlingit Indians, which is one of the Indian tribes that was based here in Juneau or in Southeast Alaska in general. And I think that that's where it derives from, but I'm not 100% sure on that.
What about distilleries and breweries that water comes from the Tongass? Are they concerned as well?
I mean, they should be. Yeah, there's, in any city, we have a bunch of breweries popping up and we have one distillery in town. And yeah, all of them, I applaud all of them because they're all local people and most of them grew up here in Juneau. And so a lot of them are getting involved strictly because they do recreate in these areas. They hunt, they fish, they camp in these protected areas. Yeah.
And even with all these activities of people out there, you still can go out and not bump into somebody?
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, yeah, Saturday, a friend of mine and I went out and we We launched our boat at 7 a.m. and we we went out and we hiked up a hillside. We sat in a meadow for a couple of hours and we shot a Sitka black-tailed deer. We harvested it and we were home before 1 p.m. and we didn't see a soul. Yeah. And so, for things like that, Juneau and Southeast in general is pretty amazing.
Like I told, I don't remember who I was interviewing a couple of weeks ago, that if I want peace and quiet like that, I have to go into my shed.
Yeah.
I closed the shed and I was watching The Boys on Amazon in there for a while with, a couple of cans of beer lined up.
Yeah.
That's the only quiet place I know of.
Yeah. Well, you definitely should come visit Alaska then.
It has been on my list for so many years. My parents went there when I was 7 and didn't bring me. And all we have are the home movies my dad made, and nobody ever wants to watch those.
Yeah. I think if you were to come up on a cruise ship, you got a lot of the hustle and bustle of people and whatnot. But if you were to come up and you could, take the Alaska State Ferry and go to a couple of the smaller communities and drive around and you can camp, it's such a great way to travel and to visit the area. There's a ton of access to different lakes and streams and whatnot in the area that are only accessible by float plane. And so that's really great too. Earlier this summer, I took a float plane out. We, chartered a float plane and went out there were 4 of us and we went out camping for a few days and, we didn't even so much as hear an airplane go over.
Wow. So did you grow up in float planes, being that your dad flew them?
Yeah. So my dad is an airplane mechanic in the area. And so he grew up, or when I was growing up, we would, there'd be a deadhead somewhere and we'd jump in it and, we'd hit the road. And my grandfather had a passion he really loved cutthroat trout. And so most of the lakes in the area have cutthroat trout in them. That's the one species that they all sort of have. And so we would go out to the lakes and, there were some times where we would spend 2 weeks at a lake and, just camp and fish and, sit around the campfire. And it was 10-year-old Kayla running around. Yeah. And so I think my childhood was a really rich upbringing because of that. And it really sort of gave me that respect for the outdoors. Yeah. And that's kind of how I grew up. So I'm way more comfortable in a float plane and just a plane in general than I am in a car.
What would you tell somebody that's going to go on their first float plane trip? Things that they should not worry about?
Yeah, it's just so interesting because this actually the float plane trip where we went out camping, 3 of the people that I was with, there were only 4 of us. So, the 3 people I was with had never been in a float plane and it kind of blew my mind. I just think it's second nature for me. You're sitting next to the pilot. You can see exactly what he's doing every time he changes and adjusts anything, the flaps and things. And I find comfort in that. Whereas, I think some people it could be a nerve-wracking process, but I definitely find comfort in that. So
what about when you come in for a landing? I assume that's got to be, you're probably used to it by now, but I would be all white-knuckled.
Again, you can see it happening, and you're landing on a lake that's, 3 to 10 miles long. So there's usually not too much to worry about.
3 to 10 mile long lake. And here, there are no natural lakes.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, they're all the artificial. So having that many lakes up there, and each one is just
big
and uninhabited.
Yeah.
How's the changing climate? I hear it's been very warm up there in the summers. Is that where you are?
Yeah. Here in Juneau, I think we had the warmest summer that we've had on the books. I think we've broke several records. Yeah, it definitely, it was kind of, it was nice. I got out on a lot of adventures and things, but it impacted my fishing a lot. The creeks didn't have any water flowing. And so the fish were really, really sort of starved for water, starved for oxygen in the water. And it was kind of a freaky thing to watch. A lot of the salmon returning were just hanging out in the estuaries for longer because there wasn't enough water to go up into the creeks. And that just, it gives more time for the seals and sea lions and whatnot to pick them off. And so it was, I did not creek fish nearly as much as I did, or I normally do because the water was so low and the fish were just so pressured already. And yeah, so it was kind of a freaky summer for that, but it was also nice because we had sun, but, we live in a rainforest. We need rain. Fish need water.
Have you seen changes throughout your years in the weather? Other than that, it's just getting hotter?
Yeah, I mean, I think like getting warmer is definitely the easiest, aspect to notice. It's also just over the years, here in Juneau, the Mendenhall Glacier is like in our backyard essentially, and you can see it just by driving up to it. And even in my lifetime, I've seen that the glacier recede, infinitely. And so, in that you can see sort of impacts like that happen. A lot of it is just, less snowfall, more rainfall in the winters. We have an awesome ski area here. The last few years have just been hard for them because they're like trying to make as much snow as they possibly can, but then it warms up too much and they can't, and all this stuff because there's just not enough snow coming down. There's too much rain coming down. And so I see impacts like that more so than, actual scientific changes. Because those are the things that I do.
Does not having a snowpack affect them in the summer? So I know the rain brings the water levels up, but how much snow melt goes into the rivers that are then feeding where the salmon and steelhead are migrating from?
No, that definitely has a huge impact on it. In the spring, with the snow melt off and whatnot, you'd hope that the rivers rise, and so that the steelhead come in, and then like the smolts, the salmon fry and whatnot out migrate. Without that rise, the water gets too warm, the water is too low, and the fish don't either return or exit. And so it's definitely impacting. And even throughout the summer, if we had a heavier snowpack last year, I don't think that this summer would have, the rivers would have been as low for the salmon.
When does the snow usually start falling?
We had like a dusting up on the mountains a few days ago, but it, typically I would say like December is really when we start getting snow, December through February.
So white Christmas?
Yep, a white Christmas typically. Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't touched a snow shovel since 2016.
Oh gosh, you're lucky then. It's kind of brutal here in Juneau because it snows and then it rains, and so it just like pressurizes the snow down on the ground, and it's like too heavy to shovel, and then it freezes. Like without a doubt, it'll always freeze after that, and so then it's just an ice rink everywhere. So
what would they cancel school for?
Man, I think I only had like 3 snow days in my life growing up here, and typically it was because it snowed like a foot or 2 overnight, and they just couldn't plow in time, and so it was like unsuitable and unsafe. And I think there was like one day, probably 6 years ago, that the university in town said, okay, if you don't live on campus, you don't have to come because there was so much ice everywhere that it was like black ice. And it was just scary to drive in.
Do your schools have air conditioning? Do you guys have air conditioning?
No, typically no.
And is that going to become an issue now that you're getting that heat in the summer?
Probably, yeah. I mean, I bought a box fan this summer for that reason. Yeah. No, not really any air conditioners. I mean, I think our average temperature in the summer is usually like, high 50s, like, mid 60s. And this summer we definitely hit like the 80s a few times, which is unlike Southeast Alaska. And it's sort of interesting because it's a rainforest, Juneau's a pretty humid place. And so, one of my good friends is from Arizona now, and he's like, wow, I've never dealt with this humidity before. He's like, I deal with heat, but this is totally different. And I'm like, yeah, that's true. Gets a little, from the East Coast.
So when it gets hot there, I imagine it's sort of like when it gets cold in Florida. When Florida drops to 50 degrees, everyone is wearing hoodies and gloves and sweaters. When it gets that hot up there, are people just sitting outside on a rocking chair like some old TV commercials, sipping ice lemonade with a fan that they're waving?
Yes. Yeah. You see like the most incredible amount of like shorts come out and like tank tops and
pasty people.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, we're all reflecting daylight.
Y'all don't get rickets up there?
I don't even know what a ricket is.
It's like lack of vitamins from no sun exposure.
No, but I will say, I'm sitting here with this and I have my happy light on. So this time of year is kind of brutal because we're losing like 5 minutes of daylight a day.
Wow.
Yeah. So in June we had, like 12 hours of daylight a day. Right now we have like I don't know, I want to say, or no, it's the opposite. We have about 12 now. We had about 18 then in June, 12 now. So you can like definitely see this like downhill, roller right now. So
Does anybody make a fly tying happy light? Is that something that Hairline needs to come out with?
I mean, they should, yeah. Yeah, your UV curing happy light.
Yeah. And before you had that light, did you get what is now called seasonal affective disorder?
Yeah, I don't know that I've ever felt the real impacts. I mean, I definitely feel like the summertime, it's such an interesting concept because in Alaska, I think in general, like the summer, you have so much daylight, you have so much like nice weather, you just like get out and you're always going. So I feel like in the summertime, I live off of like 4 hours of sleep on average, you know? And then in the winter, I'm like the opposite. It's like, oh, it's dark, it's cold, it's stormy. I'm just going to go inside and get under a blanket. And I probably average, 10 hours of sleep. And so it's an ebb and flow that you just kind of ride out. And I've never like classified it as seasonal depression, but I mean, I try to do what I can to like force myself out, and I like force myself to the gym and just like try to stay active and not become this bump on a log. So yeah, I think all of us probably are affected by it, but we're all in denial too.
Do y'all have just really cozy meals during the winter? Like, imagine that moose is going in some crock pots.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yep. Meals, pot pies. Yeah.
I'm going to send you my chicken pot pie recipe, and you put biscuits on top.
Oh, yes.
But you have to get white lily flour. I don't know if you can get white lily flour up there. You have to order it on Amazon.
Yeah, I don't know. I've never even... White lily flour.
Yeah.
Is that like for the biscuits?
Yeah, it's a southern. It's it's low in gluten because it's a winter wheat. So we're making right now in our crock pot because, it's the first day of October. I thought maybe it wouldn't be 90 degrees here.
Yeah.
So I've got beef stew cooking in. It's apple cider, bacon, beef broth. That all this chunks cooking with potatoes and onions. And then we're going to have biscuits with that tonight.
Yum. Yeah. Well, I definitely will be making a bunch of stews, I think, too, with like a bunch of the cube steak from the moose. So
awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I know. My freezer is definitely, it's plugged full with salmon and moose and deer. So
what about the birds?
There's definitely duck hunting around here and like grouse and ptarmigan hunting. I'm not as great at hunting those. The lead of a shot is not my my strong suit.
I don't even know what that is.
Well, like when the bird is flying, you have to lead the shot. Yeah.
I get you now. Yes, I've done that with skeet shooting at Orvis once.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I did. We call it trap shooting here, and I did trap shooting. I was on an all-women's league a few years ago, and I think I won most handicap shots taken throughout the season. So that pretty much means I was the worst, but I kind of improved.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so,
I've just got Red Ryder, one air rifle with a scope, and then some Crossman pistols we pulled out of one of the rivers fishing, and they still work.
Wow.
I just had to order. I got biodegradable BBs.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. I don't know how long they take. I can still see some out there in the yard.
Well, you'll just have to time them then.
Yeah.
Maybe through the winter.
Anything else about the Tongass and TU Alaska that I didn't ask or may have forgotten to ask?
I know. I think we covered a lot of it. I mean, yeah, my whole thing is that, like the Tongass for me is sort of like, it's what I like live and breathe. I was born here, I was raised here, and I'm here by choice now. And I think in Juneau, there's like 30,000 people. I think throughout Southeast, I want to say there's probably 75,000 to 100,000 people spread amongst like 32 communities or so. And we all are here because of sort of like what, Southeast Alaska provides us. And that's with like this wild area that we can recreate, that we can hunt, we can fish, we can camp, we can do all these things. And my big thing is that I would just love to see this area protected for future generations. I don't yet have children, but if I ever do, like, I want them to be able to have the childhood that I did,
Go out to restaurants now while you can.
Yeah,
sleep
that's what
in.
I've heard. So yeah, I do sleep in as much as I can. Yeah, no, so I just think, the Tongass it's one of the most wild places that's still sort of like intact and out there, and like I said, like I can, wake up and I can be fishing within 15 minutes. And, you don't get that just everywhere.
Not here.
Yeah.
Not
And
even
so,
close.
yeah, I think it's just super important. And so, yeah, I think, you know, if anyone's taking anything from this podcast, I really hope that it's just that, like, Southeast Alaska and the Tongass is still one of the, like, wild places that everyone should come and visit. And, you know, even if they can't visit, if they have visited, if they've ever been to Southeast Alaska, then you've likely been in the Tongass. And just to speak up and to tell the current administration that you want the Roadless Rule to stay intact, and yeah, that you want those protections on the forest to stay intact.
Awesome. All right.
Yeah, and they can do that through the Trout Unlimited webpage or the American Salmon Forest webpage.
Any social medias that people should be following?
Yeah, so we have a couple of
Follow
social
you
medias.
on Instagram?
Yeah, exactly. So my Instagram handle is AK Fly Shop Girl. I still haven't changed it from my days at the fly shop. I can't get rid of the handle. I love it too much. And then American Salmon Forest on Instagram, which is the Southeast-based TU branch. And then there is Trout Unlimited Alaska. Those are our three main sort of Instagram handles. And then, you know, America's Salmon Forest on Facebook and Trout Unlimited Alaska on Facebook as well.
All right. You coming out to DC anytime soon?
Not that I know of, but if I do, I will definitely let you know.
Yeah.
You can show me some of that urban fishing.
Absolutely.
I've heard that there's a place you can fish where you're actually like looking at the national monument.
Oh, you're right under them.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's like a whole thing I don't even understand.
You get helicopters flying over all day, hundreds of people walking around. You might, you know.
You might hook a bystander.
Yeah, you might find a body. You never know.
Yeah. Your bycatch is not wanted.
Apparently, one of the lifeguards at the neighborhood pool this summer said he rows in Anacostia for school.
Yeah.
And they continuously find bodies, and they call it in to the police station, and they're like, all right, thanks. They're like, and then they hang up.
Gosh.
That
Really?
It's so apparently common
Wow.
that the police just, it's like saying, yeah, there's a cat stuck in a tree. They're like, whatever, we'll get to it.
Oh my gosh, that's
Yeah.
insane.
No.
Well, that's another reason why you should come visit the Tongass.
Yeah. All right, I got some other questions for you.
Yeah.
Do you have any superstitions related to fishing?
Superstitions related to fishing. No, you know, I don't like to change what's working. And like that whole, it's always like the grass is always greener scenario where I'm fishing one side of the river and I'm like, oh, but all the fish are over there. And I always tell myself, like, don't move. Because it's like, yeah, it is like a weird superstition. Like, if I move, the fish will then be over here. So you just have to, like, put in your time. They'll come to you.
If you had a superhero power to make you a better angler, what would you choose?
Oh, my gosh. Polarized vision.
That'd be pretty sweet.
Yeah. Easy answer. Polarized vision. Yeah.
And then would you
can
just
see
wear
everything.
protective glasses so you wouldn't get a hook in your eye?
Oh,
or
yeah.
a devil's club in your
Yeah,
eye?
exactly. Yeah. Anything. Yeah. Yeah. So I don't get bushwhacked in the eye.
If you weren't an angler, what would be your thing?
I think hunting. I'd never really experienced hunting so much, and now that I have a few times, it's definitely I get it. It's you know, the fishing of the forest. Yeah, there's a lot of time that you spend just like hiking through the woods with the rifle, but also, I mean, how many hours have I logged just walking through the woods with a fly rod? So,
Is there a fishing book that you prefer over others that you would read again?
oh man, I've read so many. No, I don't have any like favorites at this point.
Okay. If you could go back in time to fish a pristine environment, where would you go?
I would have loved to see the Olympic Peninsula in its prime. All of those wild steelhead rivers, and with all the salmon populations, yeah, that's where I really would have loved to see in the prime.
Do you have a bucket list species that's outside of Alaska?
Yeah, I think like bonefish is still on my bucket list.
You know it's really hot where the bonefish are. It's sunny.
Yes, I do. I'm well aware. So I'll be wearing all of the solar gear that you've ever seen and all of the sunblock that you can buy.
What is your home fly shop?
The home fly shop is Alaska Fly Fishing Goods.
What's your favorite Alaskan beer?
Oh man, from Alaskan Brewing Company?
That's the only one I know of. Is there
Yeah,
any ones I
so-
should look for?
Well, the ones that are most like spread out, the Alaskan Brewing Company is the biggest. And I think I really like the, well, in the springtime, they do a pilot series, which is the raspberry wheat. and which is always a really great beer. But I really just love the IPA that Alaskan Brewing Company makes.
When is it okay to pose for a grip and grin with a rod balanced over your shoulders?
Never.
Right on. Correct answer. That was a multiple choice, and there was only one. It was A, and it's never.
Yeah. I can't say that I've ever taken that photo, and I can't say that I ever want to.
I'm fist bumping you from Virginia. Yeah. Strangest thing you've found on the water?
Oh gosh. There's a lot of weird things, but I think I caught a pair of old socks one time, which was weird for me.
A pair, like both of them? Were they rolled up?
Yeah, they were rolled up.
Huh.
It was like they probably fell out of someone's bag. Yeah.
I was going to say, if it was just one sock, now we know where the sock monster takes them after they get stolen from the dryer.
Of the creeks.
And is there a more typical type of litter you find in Alaska than or anything that's like a typical find? Like here, I'm finding the vape pods washed up on boat ramps.
Gosh. No, I mean, I think here the most general is probably like mono, from like spinning or fly fishing gear. We all have our Christmas tree holes that, are littered with flies and lures. But I would say like beer cans are a big one.
Do you have a deposit in Alaska?
A deposit?
For cans and bottles? We
have a recycling center, and it's interesting because they all have to get barged out. So it's just cans and plastics. I figure if glass recycling anymore. If
we had a deposit here, our shorelines and roadsides would have a lot less litter in them.
Yeah. Oh, you know what a lot of our weird litter is that you'll be walking along and you just find like a mass pile of like fish bodies, like people have filleted them out and then just thrown all the body carcasses and whatnot. And yeah, that's a big one too.
Interesting.
Yeah. That's pretty gnarly.
All right. If you're eating a moose hot dog, are you going to put ketchup or mustard on it?
Spicy mustard.
Okay. If you had a band to follow you around and play a theme song, what song would they play?
Oh my gosh. The song that I always sing when I'm fishing, and it's always when I'm not catching fish, is one of the songs from the Muppets that goes, "Mana-mana, doo-doo-doo-doo-doo."
I know that one.
I don't know. You do know that one?
Yeah.
So that would be my fishing theme song, only when I'm getting skunked.
All right. Do you have a preference for toilet paper, over or under?
Over, always. I once had it under, and I pulled the strip out, and there was a spider on it, and I will never go under anymore.
Which house in Harry Potter would you belong to?
Probably Gryffindor.
Okay.
Yep.
What's your favorite part of a Thanksgiving dinner?
The stuffing. Yes. Or the squash. I love squash, too. I'm the only person in my family that does.
Oh, we make a butternut squash gratin we got from the P. Allen Smith TV show.
Oh, yum.
I'm going to have to send that to you. And my wife just made honey nut squash, coconut milk, pureed soup from Bon Appetit, and we grew the squash out back. That awesome. Soup was insanely good.
Yeah, some of my my best friends or our family friends live in Washington State, and they're like, well, if you send us some fish, we'll send you some fresh produce. What do you want? And I'm like, apples and corn and squash.
Awesome.
And those are my fall harvests. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite Harrison Ford movie?
I don't actually. I mean, I want to say Indiana Jones just because he was such a badass in those films, but yeah.
If you do come out to DC, what is your drink?
Oh, my drink. Oh gosh, I'm a gin person, and I love like a good bee's knees anywhere I go.
A bee's knees?
Yeah, it's a gin cocktail with like simple syrup and lemon typically. And every sort of like cocktail connoisseur would like make it with their own twist of something. So I like to do like a spruce tip simple syrup. So in the spring, I'll harvest spruce tips from around here and make a simple syrup with that. And so it just adds like a little bit different flavor.
You and my wife would get along well. She's been doing grapefruit honey simple syrup.
Yeah, that would be great in a bee's knees. You should look up what the cocktail is and try it.
Do you have any irrational phobias?
No, not that I'm aware of, but my best friends might argue with that. I don't know.
Spiders and toilet paper?
Yeah, that's probably it. Yeah.
That's going to be a new gag I'm going to do.
Yeah. Spiders and toilet paper. It was like not a good way to wake up.
So last question. If you go back in time to see a band in their prime, who would you go see?
Oh, gosh. Band in their prime. I think Led Zeppelin.
Excellent choice.
Yeah. I mean, I'm of the age that I never saw them live in general, so
All right.
it would have been great.
So what's coming up next? What are you going to be for Halloween?
I don't know yet. Last year, I dressed up as the girl from E.T., and it was a great costume, and I don't know how I could ever, outdo that one.
Do you even get trick-or-treaters on an island?
We do. Actually, it's interesting. Douglas has an ordinance that trick-or-treating is not allowed, I think. They tried to, overrule it, but I grew up in downtown Juneau, and so there's trick-or-treaters all over the place. And so I typically, go to a friend's house and help hand out candy there.
What's your choice to hand out this year?
I mean, I love Reese's, so that's all I buy so that then I can have the leftovers.
Indeed. All right. Kayla, that's all my questions.
Awesome. Thank you, Rob,
It's
so
got to be,
much.
9 o'clock-ish where you are now, a.m.?
Yep. It's about 9 a.m.
Is the sun up?
It's pouring down rain outside. And
Really?
yeah, you can't tell that there's even a sun in this world because it's so gray outside.
My goodness.
Yeah, it's a typical October 1 storm. It's good because all those spawning silvers in the creeks definitely are getting their fix of water, so it's good for them.
Very
Makes
cool.
me happy.
All right, well, Kayla from TU Alaska, thank you for your time and helping us get this message out. And every listener is going to go to the Salmon Forest page in TU Alaska and fill out some forms.
Yes, thank you so much for having me, Rob. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to contact me directly at Kayla.Roys@tu.org.
And if you don't reply, you may be out moose hunting.
I know, exactly. If I'll have an automatic response up that says I'm either out, harvesting some more local meat.
Very cool. All right, well, thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks, Rob. Have a good one.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us for the Fly Fishing Consultant Podcast. For more information or to contact Rob, please go to www.robsnowhite.com.
This podcast is brought to you by Freestone Productions at freestoneproductions.com.